I've spoken before about some of the skills in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition that need a little bit of love to be brought into the game properly. Your Arcana checks, your history checks. One that really cries out to me every time for a little TLC is the good old medicine check. Now if you read through the player's handbook, there are only two suggested uses for medicine checks. Firstly, to stabilise an ally. Makes sense so far. The second is to diagnose or identify an illness. Okay, both of those uses seem reasonable and they seem like they do apply to what a medicine check should be, but if you think about it, how many times is that going to practically and usefully come up in your average campaign, one shot, or say in the Curse of Strahd? So I have a few suggested uses. Now all of these are totally homebrew and are up for discussion. If you have any better ones, let us know. A question I'm asked in the middle of combat quite often is how much health does an enemy have? Now, hit points are a funny thing. It's not really a very good way of identifying how healthy something is. In real life, a monster doesn't drop dead after one exact damage that takes it past its threshold, but otherwise was dancing and moving around and acting as if it was on full health. HP is a funny thing. So when people ask me how much health has something got, it's difficult for me to say 47 out of 158. I'm more tempted to say it looks pretty badly hurt, you might want to keep hitting it. Why don't you bring in a medicine check for that? Make it so that the character is actually using their knowledge of anatomy or extrapolating onto some sort of monstrosity or beast how damaged they think something is. You can take that one step further. Often I'm asked, does it look like an enemy has any weak points? Or I'm going to shoot this arrow but specifically at that hole that I just made off a previous attack. A medicine check might be a good way for you to get a character to check whether or not they can, in the heat of the moment, properly identify the anatomy of whatever they're fighting to identify a true weak point and then go for it. Perhaps you could use a medicine check to, in certain circumstances, convey advantage or disadvantage based on what you think they're doing. I wouldn't say that you should bring it in as an every round thing, but it could be quite situational. One of the fighter skills at a little bit of a later level is to appraise an enemy and work out whether or not certain stats are above or below their own, such as strength or constitution. And there's been a couple of attempts in other classes to convey something like that. That is the sort of a thing that a medicine check would be very good at saying. You walk into a bar, someone looks like they're getting drunk, but you're not sure how much alcohol they could take and whether or not they're bluffing in some way. An insight check can be used to look at personality, but a medicine check might be able to tell you that actually looking at the person's anatomy tells you they're wiry, hardy, maybe of high constitution. Maybe that grandma in the corner looks like she's muscled to a greater extent than you would perhaps suspect she should be at her age. Medicine checks could be used to identify things on an anatomy that would give you insight or would change the way in which you approach something. And lastly, as a mechanics thing, often long and short rests are dealt with by casting a few spells, rolling a few hit dice, and then getting all your health back at the end of a long rest. Medicine checks could be used as a good way of party members in their downtime patching wounds and generally helping each other out. Perhaps a good medicine check of the person who is leading the first aid in a short rest might mean that they get a pool of maybe 1 or 2 hit dice they can pass back to the party that aren't able to be used. Maybe a 3 hit dice can be used. Maybe, with a good medicine check, you get a +1 to everybody's constitution modifiers for that short rest. It can be used as a way of essentially aiding the party's recovery. And finally, if you were thinking about having a murder mystery style or criminal investigation style adventure, medicine check might be a fantastic way to make an autopsy, to convey the scene of a murder, to in some way gain the trajectory of a murder weapon or killing blow. It doesn't have to necessarily be looking for illness. It could be used to extrapolate what caused the illness. Now, in all of Dungeons & Dragons, there's a little bit of overlap between other skills, so in this case you might argue that survival checks might cover a lot of that, or investigation checks might cover a lot of that. But I find investigation and perception checks take up a lot of time in Dungeons & Dragons, and anything you can scoop away from that into the new medicine check bucket, I think rewards the ingenuity of players creating characters that are a little bit off the beaten track.